My name is Claire Bennett, and for most of my life, I was the responsible daughter. Not the favorite. Not the loud one. Not the daughter everyone bragged about. Just the responsible one. The one who remembered birthdays. The one who showed up on time. The one who paid her bills. The one who apologized first. And, unfortunately, the one everyone eventually assumed would clean up their messes. My younger sister, Amanda, was different. She had always been different. Where I thought about consequences, Amanda thought about opportunities. Where I saved money, she spent it. Where I planned ahead, she trusted that someone else would figure things out. And somehow, someone always did. Usually me. When we were teenagers, Amanda could break a neighbor's window and somehow convince Mom it was an accident. If I came home 10 minutes late from school, Dad wanted an explanation. If Amanda came home at midnight, Mom would make excuses for her. She's young. She's finding herself. She's just more adventurous than you. I used to wonder why being responsible seemed to make me less lovable. Then I stopped wondering. I simply accepted it. After college, I moved into a small apartment across town and started working for an accounting firm. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved the work. Numbers made sense to me. If something was wrong, there was usually a reason. If an account didn't balance, you could trace the problem. If money disappeared, there was a paper trail. People were harder. Family was hardest of all. Amanda, meanwhile, had developed a talent for making money disappear without leaving much of a trail. She opened an online boutique, then a wellness business, then a marketing agency. Each one lasted somewhere between 6 months and a year. Every time one failed, Dad would say the same thing. She's learning. And every time Amanda needed money, Mom would say, she's your sister. The sentence became a weapon. Not an expression of love. A weapon. Because whenever they said it, they expected me to surrender something. My time. My savings. My weekends. My peace. I remember one Thanksgiving especially well. I had just received a promotion at work. I was 29 years old, finally earning enough to put a down payment on a small house. I brought the news to dinner. Dad smiled. That's good. Mom nodded. Congratulations, honey. For about 10 seconds, I thought maybe this was my moment. Then Amanda walked into the dining room holding her phone. I have incredible news. Everyone turned toward her. What happened? Mom asked immediately. Amanda smiled. I found a business opportunity. Dad leaned forward. What kind? She started explaining some complicated online investment idea. I barely understood it. But Dad was fascinated. Mom was already asking how much money she needed. I quietly ate my mashed potatoes. Nobody asked about my promotion again. That night, I drove home alone. At a red light, I realized something painful. I wasn't angry that Amanda got attention. I was angry because I had spent years believing that if I became successful enough, they would finally give me some too. But apparently, success wasn't what earned attention in my family. Need did. And Amanda had become very good at needing people. 6 months later, Amanda called me. Claire, I need a favor. I closed my eyes. What kind? Nothing major. That phrase always meant the opposite. She wanted me to co-sign a small business loan. How much? 30,000. No. She laughed. Claire. I said no. You don't even know what it's for. I don't need to. Her voice changed. You know, Sometimes I think you don't actually care about this family. There it was. The guilt. I had heard it before. I took a breath. I care about you. Then prove it. I looked around my apartment. The mortgage documents for the little house I'd finally managed to buy were sitting on my kitchen table. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for protecting myself. No. She hung up. That evening, Mom called. What did you say to Amanda? I told her I couldn't co-sign. Why? Because I'm not comfortable with it. She's your sister. I know. Family helps family. I looked out the window. Family also respects boundaries. There was silence. Then Mom sighed. You've changed. I smiled sadly. Maybe. At the time, I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Because Amanda didn't simply need a loan. She needed someone whose clean financial record could make her increasingly dangerous plans look legitimate. And when I refused to give her that, she found another way. A way that would eventually put a $250,000 fraud claim at my doorstep. And when I discovered exactly how she had used my name, I realized this wasn't a family disagreement anymore. It was a trap. 3 months after I refused Amanda's loan request, I stopped hearing from her. At first, I thought it was a good thing. No late-night calls. No emergency requests. No messages asking me to just help this once. My life became quieter, and I liked the quiet. I focused on work. I spent weekends renovating my little house. I planted herbs along the kitchen window. I even started taking Sunday morning walks through the neighborhood. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for my phone to ring. Then, one Monday morning, everything changed. I was sitting at my desk reviewing quarterly accounts when my supervisor, Mark, walked over. Claire. Yes. Do you have a minute? His expression immediately caught my attention. Sure. He pulled a chair beside my desk. There was a letter delivered to the office for you. He handed me a large envelope. I recognized the logo immediately. It belonged to a commercial lending company. I frowned. Why would they send something here? I don't know. He stood. Let me know if you need anything. I waited until he walked away before opening it. The first page looked ordinary. Account number, date, balance. Then I saw the name. Amanda Bennett. I froze. My eyes moved down the page. Business credit facility. 180,000. I read it twice. Then a third time. I turned the page. There were references to multiple withdrawals. Cash advances. Electronic transfers. Business purchases. And then, a section titled, Personal Guarantor Information. My heart started pounding. Under guarantor name was my full legal name. Claire Elizabeth Bennett. I stared at it. No. Absolutely not. I had never signed anything. I had never agreed to guarantee Amanda's business. I hadn't even spoken to her in months. I continued reading. There was a copy of a signature. My signature. Or at least, something that looked like it. My stomach dropped. I zoomed in on the document using my phone. The handwriting was close. Very close. But it wasn't mine. The curve of the C was wrong. The final stroke of my last name was different. Someone had copied my signature. Someone had forged it. I immediately called the lender. After 20 minutes on hold, a representative answered. How can I assist you? My name is Claire Bennett. I received a notice regarding an account connected to my sister, Amanda Bennett. Can I have the account number? I gave it to her. There was a pause. Then keyboard clicking. Ms. Bennett, according to our records, you are listed as a personal guarantor. I am not. Another pause. I understand, but the documentation indicates. I never signed that agreement. Her voice became more careful. I can open a fraud investigation. Please do. Are you alleging that your identity or signature was used without authorization? Yes. Then we'll need documentation. What kind? Identification. Proof of address. Your bank records may be requested. And we'll need a written statement. I wrote everything down. Before ending the call, I asked one question. How much money was borrowed? She hesitated. The original credit facility was $180,000. My stomach tightened. And the current balance? With fees, penalties, and additional transactions. She paused. Approximately $250,000. I closed my eyes. $250,000. Amanda hadn't simply borrowed money. She had apparently taken money using my identity as security. And now the lender wanted me to pay for it. That evening, I drove straight to my parents' house. I hadn't planned to, but I needed answers. Mom opened the door. Her face changed the moment she saw me. Claire, is Amanda here? She looked away. That was my first answer. Mom. What happened? I held up the lender's letter. This. Her eyes dropped to the page. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she whispered, "Oh God. You knew." "No. You knew something." She stepped aside. "Come in." I walked into the living room. Dad was sitting in his recliner watching television. He looked up. "What's going on?" I placed the documents on the coffee table. "Why is my name on Amanda's loan?" Dad stared at the paperwork. His face went pale. "Where did you get that?" "From the lender." He looked at Mom. Mom looked at Dad. That silent exchange told me more than either of them could have said. "You knew." Dad shook his head. "Not exactly." "What does that mean?" He stood slowly. "Amanda told us she had a business loan." "No. She said you were helping her." I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. I told her months ago that I would never co-sign for her. Mom immediately said, "She must have misunderstood." "No. I was very clear." Dad rubbed his forehead. "Claire, maybe there's been some mistake." I pointed at the signature. "That's my name." "But it isn't your signature," he admitted. Silence. Finally, I asked, "Where is Amanda?" Mom's eyes filled with tears. "She left." "When?" 2 days ago." "Where?" "We don't know." I stared at them. My own parents. The same people who had spent years defending Amanda. And suddenly, they looked frightened. Not angry. Not defensive. Frightened. I picked up the papers. "Did she use my social security number?" Neither answered. I felt a cold wave move through me. "Did she?" Dad finally whispered. "We think so." I stepped backward. 4 years. I had been the responsible daughter. The one who fixed things. The one who stayed calm. The one who helped. But standing there, I realized something. This wasn't a problem I could fix. It wasn't my mistake. It wasn't my debt. And it certainly wasn't my responsibility. I looked at my parents. "Listen carefully." Dad stared at me. I am not paying this. Mom immediately began crying. But Claire. No. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I held up the document. Someone committed fraud using my identity. And before I do anything else, I am going to find out exactly who helped them. I turned toward the door. Dad called after me. Claire. I stopped. His voice was barely audible. Please. Don't involve the police. I slowly turned around. And for the first time, I looked at my father differently, because if he was worried about the police, there was one question I suddenly couldn't ignore. What exactly did my parents know? I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that forged signature. My name. My address. My financial information. Someone had taken pieces of my identity and used them to create a debt I had never agreed to. But the part that bothered me most wasn't the lender. It was Dad's reaction. Don't involve the police. Why would an innocent person say that? By 6 the next morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table with every document spread in front of me. I made 3 piles. Documents I recognized. Documents I didn't recognize. Questions I needed answered. The 3rd pile became the biggest. How had Amanda gotten my information? Who submitted the application? Who witnessed the signature? Why had the lender believed it was me? And most importantly, who knew this was happening? At 8:30, I called the fraud department again. This time, I asked for everything. Can you tell me when the application was submitted? The representative checked the account. Approximately 4 months ago. 4 months. That meant Amanda had started this only a few weeks after I refused to co-sign. My hands tightened around my coffee mug. How was the application submitted? Online. Was identity verification completed? Yes. What information was used? She hesitated. For security reasons. I can't provide all the details. I understand. But can you tell me whether the applicant had access to my personal information? Another pause. Several pieces of information matched your credit profile. My stomach turned. What kind of information? Date of birth. Previous address. Employer information. I stared at the wall. That wasn't information Amanda could simply guess. My previous address wasn't public. My employer wasn't listed on my old documents. And my date of birth. She obviously knew that. But there was something else. Did they have my social security number? The representative became silent. Then she said, the application included a social security number that matches yours. I closed my eyes. There it was. Confirmation. This wasn't a mistake. Someone had deliberately used my identity. I contacted my bank next. Then the credit bureaus. Then my employer's human resources department. I changed passwords. Froze accounts. Reviewed every transaction. For nearly 6 hours, I worked through the mess. By the end of the afternoon, I had discovered something terrifying. 2 months earlier, someone had attempted to open a credit card using my information. The application had been rejected. I hadn't noticed because I never received the notification. Then there was another attempt. And another. All connected to businesses I'd never heard of. Amanda. It had to be Amanda. But I still needed proof. That evening, Mom called. I almost didn't answer. Eventually, I did. Hello. Claire. Her voice sounded exhausted. Your father wants to talk to you. I'm listening. Dad came onto the line. Claire, I want you to know something. Okay. We never wanted this to happen. I stared at the ceiling. Then tell me what happened. Silence. Your sister was struggling. That's not an answer. Her business was failing. I know. She owed money. How much? Another silence. About $80,000. I sat upright. 80,000? Yes. Then how did she end up borrowing 180,000? We don't know. You don't know? Dad sighed. She told us she could fix everything if she got one large loan. And when I refused to co-sign? He didn't answer. I already knew. She used my information. We didn't know she was going to forge your signature. I felt something inside me crack. But you knew she was using my name. We suspected. How long? Dad's voice became barely audible. About 3 weeks. I stood up. You knew for 3 weeks. Claire. And you didn't tell me? We were trying to handle it. No. I shook my head even though he couldn't see me. You were trying to protect Amanda. Mom began crying in the background. Dad didn't deny it. That hurt more than anything. I drove to their house again. This time, I wasn't angry. I was calm. Sometimes calm is more dangerous than anger. I placed my phone on the table and opened the recording app. I wasn't recording secretly. I wanted everything documented. Tell me exactly what you knew. Dad stared at me. Mom wiped her eyes. Dad finally spoke. Amanda came to us after you refused the loan. What did she say? She said you had changed. I almost laughed. Of course. She told us you had enough money to help but simply didn't want to. I shook my head. Keep going. She said she could get the loan approved if she listed you as a guarantor. Did you tell her not to? Dad looked at Mom. Then back at me. No. The room became silent. Why? Dad swallowed. Because we thought you would eventually forgive her. I stared at him. You knew she was planning to use my identity. We didn't know she'd actually do it. But you knew. Yes. That single word changed everything. I picked up my phone. Did you receive any money? Mom immediately said. No. Dad hesitated. That hesitation was enough. I looked at him. Did you? He looked down. She gave us $20,000. My chest tightened. For what? To pay off the mortgage. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So you benefited from the fraud. We didn't know where the money came from. You knew Amanda was desperate. Yes. You knew she was using my identity. Yes. And you accepted $20,000 from her. Dad closed his eyes. We were scared. I nodded slowly. Now I understand. Mom reached for my hand. Claire. Please. I pulled away. I spent my entire life believing I was the difficult daughter because I had boundaries. I looked at both of them. But I wasn't difficult. I was the only person in this family who understood that consequences were real. Neither spoke. I stood. I've already contacted the fraud department. Mom's face went pale. No. I've also frozen my credit. Dad looked terrified. Claire, please don't destroy your sister's life. I stared at him. She did that herself. Then I walked toward the door. Behind me, Mom whispered. Where are you going? I stopped. To an attorney. Dad's voice cracked. Why? I turned around. Because you told me to protect the family. I held up the fraudulent loan documents. But this time, I'm protecting myself. I walked out. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. But I didn't yet know that Amanda had left behind one final piece of evidence. A piece of evidence that would prove exactly how far she had gone, and who had helped her create the fake signature. The next morning, I received a message from the lender. Ms. Bennett, we have located the original application video. You need to see it immediately. The email from the lender arrived at 8:17 the next morning. I remember the exact time because I had been sitting at my kitchen table staring at the same cup of coffee for nearly 20 minutes. I opened the message. There was one sentence that immediately caught my attention. Ms. Bennett, we have located the original application verification recording. Below it was a secure link. I clicked it. The video loaded slowly. For a moment, the screen remained black. Then a woman appeared. She was sitting in front of a plain white wall. Dark hair. Grey sweater. Head slightly lowered. The camera angle was poor. But I recognized her immediately. Amanda. My sister. She looked directly into the camera and began reading the verification statement required by the lender. My name is Claire Elizabeth Bennett. I froze. Amanda was pretending to be me. She continued. I confirm that I am applying for this credit facility. My hands tightened around the coffee mug. There was no misunderstanding anymore. No possibility that someone at the bank had simply made a mistake. My sister had deliberately impersonated me, and she had done it on camera. I watched the entire recording twice. The second time, I noticed something I hadn't caught during the first viewing. Someone was sitting behind the camera. Only part of their shoulder appeared at the edge of the frame. A man's hand reached into view briefly and placed a document on the table. I paused the video, zoomed in, then froze. I recognized the watch. It belonged to my father. The same silver watch he'd worn for almost 20 years. I called the lender immediately. I need a copy of this recording. We can provide it to law enforcement or your attorney. I've already contacted an attorney. Then we'll cooperate with the investigation. I thanked her and ended the call. For several minutes, I simply sat there. My sister had committed the fraud. But my father had been there, watching, helping, maybe even participating. The realization hurt more than the money ever could. My attorney's name was Laura Mitchell. A colleague from my accounting firm recommended her. I sent her every document I had. The forged signature. The loan application. The credit reports. The lender's correspondence. And finally, the video. She called me that afternoon. Claire. Yes. I've reviewed everything. And you have a serious identity theft case. I closed my eyes. I know. There's something else. What? The application lists a second contact number. Whose? She paused. Your father's. My stomach dropped. Are you sure? Yes. Why would his number be there? That's what we're going to find out. Laura advised me not to contact Amanda directly. Don't threaten her. Don't negotiate. Don't accuse her. Let the evidence speak. I agreed. Then she asked, do you want to pursue criminal charges? I looked down at the table. For years, I'd been trained to protect my family. Keep the peace. Forgive. Stay quiet. Don't embarrass your parents. Don't make Amanda look bad. But something had changed. I wasn't protecting the family anymore. I was protecting the person who had been left unprotected for years. Me. Yes. Laura didn't hesitate. Then we'll file the formal complaint. The police interview lasted almost 2 hours. Detective Harris was patient. He asked me to explain everything from the beginning. I told him about the loan, the forged signature, the credit applications, my conversation with my parents, the $20,000 they had received, and finally, the video. When he watched it, his expression changed. "That's your sister?" "Yes." "And this is you?" He pointed to my driver's license photograph. "Yes." He nodded slowly. "She's clearly impersonating you." I swallowed. "What happens now?" "We investigate." "Will they arrest her?" "If the evidence supports charges." "And my parents?" He looked at me carefully. "If they knowingly assisted, their involvement will be investigated too." I nodded. For the first time, I understood something important. Justice didn't require me to hate my family. It simply required me to stop protecting people from the consequences of what they had done. 3 days later, the lender contacted me again. "Ms. Bennett, we've identified another document." My heart started beating faster. What document? A transfer authorization. Connected to the loan? Yes. Whose account received the funds? The representative paused. Your sister's business account initially. Then, within 48 hours, most of the money was transferred elsewhere. Where? She gave me an account number. Laura traced it. The account belonged to my parents. I stared at the screen. $20,000 wasn't the whole story. It was only the amount Dad had admitted. There had been another transfer. $65,000. I called Laura immediately. "There's more." "How much?" $65,000. "Where did it go?" "My parents' account." There was a long silence. Then Laura said, "Claire." "Yes." This may be much bigger than identity theft. I knew what she meant. Amanda hadn't simply forged my signature to save her business. Money had been moved. My parents had benefited. And someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to make the transaction look legitimate. That evening, my phone rang. It was Mom. I watched the screen for almost a minute. Then answered. Her voice was trembling. "Claire." "What?" "Your father wants to talk to you." "I don't have anything to say. Please." I remained silent. Then Dad came onto the phone. His voice sounded broken. "Claire." "What?" "I need you to come home." "Why?" "Because there's something you don't know." I stared through the kitchen window into the darkness outside. "What?" He took a shaky breath. "Amanda didn't do this alone." My heart stopped. "I know." "No. You don't." His voice cracked. "There was someone else." "Who?" Silence. Then he whispered a name. A name I never expected to hear. A name that would completely change how I understood the fraud. And my own family. I didn't say anything for several seconds. My father had just told me there was someone else involved. Not just Amanda. Someone else. "Who?" I finally asked. Dad's breathing sounded heavy through the phone. "Your mother's brother." I frowned. "Uncle Robert?" "Yes." I leaned back in my chair. Robert had always been the successful one in Mom's family. He owned several rental properties and had spent years working in finance. He was the person everyone called whenever they needed advice about money. I remembered him telling me once, when I was 22, "Claire, you're too careful with money." At the time, I'd laughed. Now the memory felt different. What did Uncle Robert do? Dad hesitated. He helped Amanda create the application. How? He knew how the verification system worked. My stomach tightened. So he knew she was pretending to be me? Yes. And you knew? Dad didn't answer. Dad. Yes. I closed my eyes. 3 people. Amanda. Uncle Robert. My father. All involved in something that had been built around my identity. And my mother had apparently known enough to suspect it. I felt something inside me go completely numb. I drove to my parents' house that night. Mom opened the door. Her eyes were swollen. She had clearly been crying. Where's Dad? In the kitchen. I walked inside. Dad was sitting at the table with his head in his hands. He looked up. I owe you the truth. I pulled out a chair. Then tell me everything. He nodded. For the next hour, he explained what had happened. Amanda's business had been failing. She had accumulated debts. Suppliers were demanding payment. Employees were threatening to quit. She was desperate. Uncle Robert told her that a large business credit facility could solve everything. But Amanda couldn't qualify. Her credit was terrible. Then Robert suggested something. Use a financially stable family member as the guarantor. My father said Amanda initially wanted to use Mom. But Mom's credit wasn't strong enough. Then they thought of me. I had excellent credit. Stable employment. A mortgage that was always paid on time. No major debt. I was the perfect target. Why? Didn't you stop them? I asked. Dad looked down. I should have. That's not an answer. He swallowed. I was afraid. Of what? Losing Amanda. I stared at him. You were willing to risk losing me. His eyes filled with tears. I didn't think it would go this far. I shook my head. You knew they were using my information. I knew they were planning to. And you didn't tell me. No. Why? He looked directly at me. Because your mother and I believed you would forgive us. I laughed quietly. That's what you thought. He nodded. You've always been the forgiving one. That sentence hurt more than he realized. Because they hadn't mistaken forgiveness for kindness. They had mistaken it for weakness. I asked the question I'd been avoiding. How did they get my documents? Dad looked away. Amanda had access to your old room. My heart stopped. My old room? After you moved out, some of your files were still there. Tax documents? Yes. Bank statements? He nodded. Copies of your driver's license? I stared at him. Who gave them to her? Dad didn't answer. I already knew. Mom? He nodded. I stood up. My mother appeared in the doorway. She was crying. I thought I was helping her. I looked at her. You gave my private documents to someone who planned to impersonate me. I didn't know she'd commit fraud. You knew she wanted my financial information. Yes. And you gave it to her anyway. She couldn't answer. That silence was enough. Then Dad said something that changed everything. There's one more thing. I looked at him. What? The 65,000. What about it? It wasn't supposed to go to us. I frowned. Then where was it supposed to go? Dad reached into a drawer and pulled out a folder. He placed it on the table. Inside were transaction records. The 65,000 had been transferred into my parents' account. Then divided. 20,000 went toward their mortgage. 15,000 went to pay Amanda's outstanding business suppliers. And the remaining 30,000 had been transferred to another account. I recognized the name immediately. Robert Bennett Financial Consulting. Uncle Robert. I looked up. How much did he get? 30,000. And what did he do for that money? Dad's voice dropped. He created the paperwork. What paperwork? The documents that made it look like you had authorized the loan. I felt sick. So he forged my signature. Dad nodded. And created false verification records. I stared at the documents. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a desperate mistake. It was organized, planned, and deliberate. My phone vibrated. A message from Detective Harris. We need to speak with you immediately. I showed it to Dad. His face went pale. Please don't do this. I looked at him. What? Don't press charges. I slowly shook my head. Dad, I'll pay you back. That's not the point. I'll sell the house. That's not the point. I'll give you everything we have. That's not the point. He stood. Then what is the point? I looked at him for a long moment. The point is that you all looked at me and decided my life was worth risking. Nobody spoke. I continued. You didn't ask. You didn't warn me. You didn't care whether I could lose my home. You simply assumed I'd fix it. Dad lowered his head. And for the first time, I wasn't trying to make him understand because I wanted an apology. I wanted him to understand because I needed to finally understand myself. I had spent years believing my family ignored me because I wasn't important. But now I realized something. Worse. They had always known I was dependable. They simply believed dependable meant available. And they had confused my kindness with permission. The next morning, Detective Harris arrived at my house with another officer. He sat across from me at the kitchen table. We've reviewed the documents. Okay. We've also contacted the lender. What happens now? He placed a folder on the table. We're building a case against your sister and your uncle. And my parents. He paused. We're investigating their involvement. I nodded. Then he added, there's something else you should know. What? Amanda has been located. My heart began beating faster. Where? At a hotel 2 states away. Is she under arrest? Not yet. She's asking to speak with you. I stared at him. Why? Detective Harris looked at me carefully. She says she knows where the remaining money went. I felt a cold chill run through me. Because if Amanda knew where the money was, then she also knew something else. Something nobody had told me. And whatever that secret was, it could determine whether my parents were victims of my sister's scheme, or willing participants from the very beginning. I didn't sleep the night before I agreed to meet Amanda. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same things. The forged signature. The 250,000 balance. My parents sitting at their kitchen table, admitting they'd known. And Uncle Robert's name on the transfer records. But underneath all of that was one question. Why? Why would Amanda risk everything? Why would my parents allow it? And why had they believed I would simply accept the consequences? The detective arranged for me to speak with Amanda at a secure location. I almost changed my mind twice on the drive there. Not because I was afraid of her. Because I knew that once I heard the truth, there would be no going back. Some truths don't repair families. They redefine them. Amanda was sitting alone in a small interview room when I walked in. She looked nothing like the sister I remembered. Her hair was tied back messily. Her face was pale. She looked exhausted. When she saw me, she stood. Claire. I didn't answer. She slowly sat back down. I know you're angry. I'm not here to be angry. Then why are you here? To hear the truth. She looked at the table. You deserve it. I sat across from her. Start at the beginning. She took a deep breath. My business was failing. I know. No. She shook her head. You don't know how bad it was. I owed almost $140,000 before the loan. I stared at her. How? Suppliers. Credit cards. Payroll. Taxes. She swallowed. I kept borrowing money to keep the business alive. And then, I ran out of people willing to lend me anything. I looked at her. So you decided to use me? She nodded. Yes. The honesty caught me off guard. No excuses. No denial. Just yes. Who came up with the plan? Uncle Robert. How? He told me your credit was excellent. He knew. Everyone knew. I frowned. Everyone? Amanda looked away. Mom and Dad talked about you all the time. I almost laughed. That's funny. They always said you were the financially responsible one. Apparently. She rubbed her hands together nervously. Robert said we could make it look like you had agreed to guarantee the loan. Make it look? Yes. With my signature. She nodded. With the video? Another nod. I stared at her. How did you record the video? She looked ashamed. Robert coached me. How did you get my documents? She hesitated. Mom gave me a folder. My chest tightened. What folder? Your old tax records. Bank statements. Copies of your ID. Everything went silent. I had suspected it. Hearing her confirm it still hurt. Did Mom know what you were going to do? Amanda's eyes filled with tears. Not everything. That's not an answer. She knew we were using your information. Did she know the loan was going to be in my name? Yes. I stared at her. And Dad? He knew too. So everyone knew. Not everyone. Who didn't? You. The answer was so simple. It almost broke me. I looked down at my hands. For years, I had wondered why my family had treated me differently. Why Amanda was protected. Why my achievements didn't matter. Why my boundaries were always treated as selfishness. Now I understood. They hadn't viewed me as a daughter. Not entirely. They had viewed me as the reliable one. The safe one. The one who could be counted on. And somewhere along the way, that became an excuse to use me. Where did the remaining money go? Amanda looked at me. You really want to know? That's why I'm here. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. She placed it on the table. This is everything. I opened it. Names. Amounts. Dates. Transfers. Payments. My eyes moved down the page. Then stopped. There were dozens of transactions. The $180,000 had been divided almost immediately. Some paid old debts. Some went to suppliers. Some covered personal expenses. Some went to my parents. Some went to Robert. But there was one payment that didn't make sense. $42,500 cash withdrawal. Where did this go? Amanda shook her head. I don't know. You withdrew it. Yes. Then where is it? I gave it to someone. Who? She stared at me. I can't tell you. I closed the notebook. Then this conversation is over. No. She reached across the table. Please. I stood. She whispered. I gave it to someone who promised to make everything disappear. I stopped. Who? Amanda's voice became almost inaudible. Someone your parents know. I turned around. Who? She looked terrified. Then finally said, your father's old business partner. My heart sank. Michael? She nodded. Michael had disappeared from Dad's life years ago after a business dispute. I remembered Dad telling me never to trust him. Now I understood why that warning had always sounded strangely personal. I sat back down. What did Michael promise? That he could move the money. Move it where? Off the books. I stared at her. Why? Because Robert told me the loan company would eventually investigate. So you tried to hide the money? Yes. And Michael helped. That's what I was told. I looked at the notebook again. Where is the $42,500 now? Amanda shook her head. I don't know. But Michael does. She nodded. Before leaving, I asked Amanda one final question. Why didn't you just tell me? She looked at me. I was ashamed. I waited. She continued. I knew you'd say no. Yes. I knew you'd tell me I was making a mistake. Probably. And I couldn't stand the idea of you being right. That answer was painfully honest. I shook my head. You weren't afraid of losing money. What were you afraid of? Being the failure. I looked at my sister. For the first time. I didn't see the spoiled younger daughter. I saw a frightened woman who had spent years building a life around appearances. But understanding someone didn't mean excusing them. I stood. You should have asked me. I know. You should have accepted my no. I know. You should never have used my identity. I know. And now. She wiped her tears. Now I have to face what I did. I nodded. Yes. I walked toward the door. Behind me. Amanda whispered. Claire. I stopped. I'm sorry. I didn't turn around. Me too. Then I walked out. That evening, Detective Harris called. We've got enough evidence to move forward. Against Amanda? Yes. Robert? Yes. My parents? There was a pause. We're still investigating. I looked out my window. For the first time in weeks, I felt strangely calm. The debt was still there on paper. The fraud was still being investigated. My family was falling apart. But one thing was finally clear. I didn't owe them $250,000. I didn't owe them my savings. I didn't owe them my house. And I didn't owe them forgiveness before I was ready. The bill had arrived at my door because they believed I would carry their burden. They were about to learn something they should have understood years ago. I was no longer the daughter who said yes just because everyone else said, your family. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. For the first time in weeks, I didn't immediately reach for my phone. I just lay there quietly, staring at the ceiling. The house was peaceful. My house. The one I had bought with years of careful saving. The one that had suddenly become collateral in someone else's disaster simply because my family believed my life was available for them to use. I got out of bed and walked into the kitchen. The lender's letter was still sitting on the counter. $250,000. I picked it up. Then I did something I probably should have done years earlier. I stopped thinking about how my decision would affect everyone else. I started thinking about what was right for me. At 9 o'clock, I met Laura at her office. She had already prepared a thick folder. How are you holding up? I'm okay. She studied my face. You don't have to protect anyone anymore, Claire. I nodded. I know. She opened the folder. The lender has agreed to place the debt under formal fraud review. What does that mean? It means they won't pursue you as the responsible party while the investigation is active. I exhaled. That's good. There's more. She turned another page. The forged documents are strong evidence. The video is stronger. And the financial transfers are extremely important. Because my parents received money. Correct. She looked directly at me. But there's something you need to understand. What? You cannot assume your family will admit everything. I smiled sadly. They already did. Some of it. She closed the folder. People often tell the truth when they think they're going to be protected. And they lie when they think they're going to lose something. I nodded. Then I'll let the evidence speak. That afternoon, I received a call from my mother. I watched the screen for a long time. Then answered. Hello, Claire. She sounded exhausted. Can we talk? I'm listening. Your father wants to see you. Why? He says there's something he needs to give you. I sighed. What? He won't tell me. I almost refused. But something told me I should go. Not because I owed them anything. Because I wanted the truth. When I arrived at my parents' house, Dad was waiting at the kitchen table. He looked older than he had a week earlier. He had a folder in front of him. Mom sat beside him. Neither spoke as I entered. I took the chair opposite them. Dad pushed the folder toward me. This belongs to you. I opened it. Inside were copies of my old documents. Tax forms. Bank statements. An old driver's license copy. Employment records. Everything Amanda had used. I looked at Dad. Where did you get these? They were in a box in the garage. Why are you giving them to me now? He looked down. Because I should have protected them. I didn't respond. He continued. I should have protected you. Mom began crying. We were so focused on Amanda. Dad nodded. We kept telling ourselves she needed us more. And you? We convinced ourselves you didn't need anyone. I stared at them. That sentence was almost worse than the fraud. Because it explained everything. They hadn't ignored me because I wasn't capable. They ignored me because they assumed I was strong enough to survive without them. But being strong doesn't mean you don't deserve love. I said quietly. You mistook my independence for permission to neglect me. Mom covered her face. Dad looked devastated. I know. I pushed the folder aside. What do you want from me? Dad looked surprised. Nothing. Then why am I here? Because you deserve an apology. I waited. He took a deep breath. I'm sorry. No excuses. No but. No mention of Amanda. Just 2 words. For a moment, I felt something unexpected. Not happiness. Not forgiveness. Relief. Because I'd spent years waiting for someone to finally acknowledge that what happened mattered. And now, they had. Dad continued. I can't undo what we did. No. I can't give you back the birthdays we forgot. No. I can't give you back the years you spent believing you weren't important. I looked down. No. But I can stop asking you to protect us. He reached into the folder and pulled out another document. This is a written statement. I read the first few lines. It explained what he knew. What Mom knew. What Amanda had told them. The money they received. And the involvement of Robert. I looked up. You signed this? Yes. Knowing it could be used against you? Yes. Mom nodded. We both signed. I stared at them. Why? Dad's eyes filled with tears. Because for once, we need to do the right thing even if it hurts us. I took the statement. Thank you. Dad looked surprised. For what? For finally telling the truth. Mom reached for my hand. This time, I didn't pull away. But I didn't squeeze it either. There was a difference between allowing someone close and allowing them to cross your boundaries again. I had learned that difference the hard way. Before I left, Dad said something that stayed with me. Claire. I turned. You don't have to forgive us. I looked at him. You don't have to pretend everything is okay. He swallowed. We'll accept whatever distance you need. I nodded. That was the first time my parents had ever respected a boundary without arguing. Maybe that was where healing actually began. Not with forgiveness. Not with forgetting. But with finally hearing the word no. And having the other person accept it. 2 days later, Laura called. The lender has officially removed you from the collection action. I closed my eyes. So the debt isn't mine? Correct. I smiled. Good. And Claire? Yes. The police have issued warrants. My smile disappeared. For Amanda. For Amanda and Robert. I took a breath. And my parents? They're cooperating. I sat quietly. The $250,000 bill that had arrived at my door was finally going back to the people who created it. But there was one problem. Amanda was still missing. And the investigators had just discovered that the $42,500 cash withdrawal wasn't the only money that had disappeared. Another $90,000 was unaccounted for, and according to the bank records, that money had been transferred the day before Amanda disappeared. To an account bearing my name. Someone had created another account using my identity. And whoever controlled it was still moving money. The detective's words stayed in my head all night. Another $90,000 had been transferred to an account bearing my name. I had never opened that account. I had never seen it. And yet, someone had apparently been using my identity again. At 7 the next morning, I called Laura. I need you to check something. What? There's another account. I know. No. I mean, I want to know exactly when it was opened. There was a pause. Give me an hour. I waited. An hour became 2. Then my phone rang. Claire. Laura's voice sounded different. What? The account was opened 6 months ago. My stomach tightened. 6 months? Yes. That's before the $250,000 loan. Correct. I sat down. So this was planned before Amanda even applied for the loan. That's what it looks like. I stared out the window. This wasn't a desperate decision anymore. Someone had been preparing. Laura sent me the documents. The account had been opened digitally. My name. My date of birth. My social security number. My old address. But there was one detail that immediately stood out. The phone number attached to the account. It wasn't mine. I read it again. Then I recognized the area code. It belonged to my hometown. Who owns this number? I asked. Laura replied. We're trying to find out. A few minutes later, another message arrived. Your father used this number years ago. I felt my chest tighten. I called Dad. He answered almost immediately. Claire, did you have another phone number? Silence. Years ago. Is it still active? No. Who used it? Why? Because it was attached to an account opened in my name. Another silence. This one lasted much longer. Finally, Dad whispered, Robert. I closed my eyes. Of course. Uncle Robert. Again. I drove to the police station that afternoon. Detective Harris was waiting for me. We traced the account. Where? An online bank. Who accessed it? Several devices. Can you identify them? We're working on it. He slid a printed report across the table. The access locations were listed by date. Most were from my hometown. One was from my parents' house. Another was from Robert's office. But there was one location that made me stop. My house. I looked up. That's impossible. Harris nodded. That's why we checked it twice. I never accessed this account. I believe you. Then how? He pointed to the date. Do you remember anyone visiting your house around this time? I thought. 6 months earlier. A family gathering. Mom had visited. Dad had come with her. Amanda had been there too. I suddenly remembered something. Amanda had asked to use my computer. She said her phone battery was dead. I had let her. I hadn't thought twice about it. Now I wished I had. I went home and opened my old computer. I hadn't used it in months. The browser history was still there. I searched the date. And there it was. A banking website. A login page. An account creation page. And then, an email confirmation. I stared at the screen. The email address wasn't mine, but the recovery phone number was. My old family landline. I took screenshots. Then I called Detective Harris. I found something. The police collected the computer. They also took copies of my old devices. The investigation suddenly moved much faster. 2 days later, Harris called. We have a match. To what? The account. Who accessed it? Your sister. I closed my eyes. Can you prove it? We have device records. What else? Her fingerprints were found on one of the devices. That wasn't enough. Not for me. Because I knew Amanda had used my computer. But the next sentence changed everything. We also found evidence of Robert accessing the account. And my parents. Your father's credentials were used once. I sat completely still. Once. Yes. Was he transferring money? No. What was he doing? Harris paused. He was viewing the account. I didn't know what to feel. Anger. Disappointment. Maybe both. That evening, Mom came to my house. Alone. She stood at my front door for almost a minute before speaking. I know. I stepped aside. Come in. She walked into the living room. I know what you found. I looked at her. Did Dad tell you? No. Then how? She sat down. Detective Harris called us. I nodded. What did you know about the account? She looked down. Only that Robert created something. Something. I didn't know what. You knew. Yes. Mom. She started crying. I'm sorry. I sat across from her. How many times were you going to let this happen? I thought it would stop. When? When Amanda got the loan. And then? I thought Robert would close everything. And when he didn't? She had no answer. I asked the question I'd been avoiding. Why were you willing to risk me? Mom looked directly at me. Because we thought you'd understand. I almost laughed. Understand what? That Amanda was desperate. And I wasn't. She went silent. My life mattered too. I know. No. You don't. I stood. 4 years, every time Amanda made a mistake, everyone rushed to save her. You protected her from consequences. You paid her debts. You defended her. And when I said no, you decided my no didn't matter. Mom cried harder. I know. I shook my head. That's the problem. You know now. But you didn't care when it mattered. Mom eventually stood. At the door, she turned. Claire. What? I don't expect you to forgive me. I nodded. Good. But I want you to know something. What? I finally understand. She looked around my house. You built this life without us. You didn't need us. But we needed you. I didn't answer. She left. I closed the door. Then I stood there in silence. For the first time, I realized something strange. They weren't calling because they loved me. They were calling because they had finally discovered what my absence meant. The next morning, Detective Harris called again. We found Amanda. My heart skipped. Where? At an airport. Is she alone? Yes. Did she try to leave the country? She was carrying a passport. I closed my eyes. What happens now? She wants to make a deal. For what? Information. About the money. About everything. I took a breath. What does she know? Harris paused. She says your parents weren't the people who started this. Then who was? His answer made my blood run cold. Your Uncle Robert. And Amanda says he wasn't trying to steal $250,000. I frowned. Then what was he trying to do? Harris looked at the file in front of him. He was trying to take something much bigger. What? Your company. I couldn't speak. Because suddenly, the $250,000 debt wasn't the real target. I was. The words echoed in my mind long after Detective Harris ended the call. Your company. I sat alone in my office that evening, staring at the city through the glass windows. My company had taken me 12 years to build. 12 years of early mornings, late nights, missed vacations, rejected proposals, failed projects, successful projects. Every dollar had been earned. Every client had been earned. Every employee had been hired carefully. It wasn't just a business. It was the life I'd built after realizing nobody was coming to save me. And now someone had apparently tried to use my identity to gain access to it. I immediately called Laura. I need you to investigate something. What happened? I think the loan was connected to my company. There was silence. Tell me everything. I explained what Detective Harris had said. Laura listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked, "Have you checked your corporate records?" "Not yet." "Do that immediately." I logged into the company's legal portal. At first, everything looked normal. Ownership, shareholders, board members, tax records. Nothing seemed unusual. Then I checked the recent filings. My stomach dropped. There had been an attempt to register a new corporate entity. Same business name. Almost identical address. Almost identical logo. And one of the listed directors was Robert Bennett. I stared at the screen. He had tried to create a company that looked almost identical to mine. Why? I opened the attached documents. There were applications for business credit, vendor accounts, equipment financing, banking services. Someone had apparently been trying to build a second company using my reputation. My reputation. My identity. My company's name. Suddenly, the $250,000 loan made sense. It hadn't been the final objective. It had been the first step. Laura arrived at my office the next morning. She brought 2 attorneys from her firm. We've reviewed the filings. What do you think? Laura placed a document on the table. Someone was attempting to create a parallel company. Using my name? Not exactly. Then whose? Your company's name with minor alterations. She showed me the registration. I recognized the strategy immediately. A customer searching for my company online could easily mistake the 2 businesses. How far did they get? They had opened preliminary accounts. Did they receive money? Not yet. I leaned back. So they were building the shell before taking anything. That's what it looks like. I felt a chill. And Amanda. Her involvement appears to have been securing financing. Robert handled the corporate structure. And my parents. Laura looked at me. They may have been used as intermediaries. I shook my head. My parents knew enough. Probably. But there's a difference between knowing something is wrong and understanding the full scheme. I thought about Mom. For the first time, I wondered if she had been protecting Amanda because she was afraid of losing her daughter, or because she was afraid of what Amanda might reveal. That afternoon, Detective Harris called. Amanda is ready to cooperate. What does she want? Reduced charges. Of course. But her information is valuable. What did she tell you? Robert planned to use the fraudulent loan as proof of financial activity associated with your identity. For what purpose? To create a paper trail. I frowned. A paper trail? Yes. He explained. The fraudulent loan would establish financial activity connected to me. Then the fake company could appear legitimate. Eventually, they could approach investors and lenders. If anything went wrong, the debt and suspicious transactions would point toward me. I felt sick. They wanted to make it look like I was responsible. Exactly. I leaned back. And my parents? They were supposed to receive some of the money. Why? Robert told them it was compensation for helping establish the business. I closed my eyes. So Dad's $20,000 wasn't simply a desperate acceptance of money. He had been promised something. That evening, I went to see my father. He looked exhausted. I placed the documents on the table. Did Robert tell you he was creating another company? Dad stared at the papers. His face went pale. Yes. My heart sank. You knew. He said it was temporary. Temporary? He told me he was helping Amanda. And you believed him? Dad shook his head. I didn't know the whole plan. But you knew enough. He looked at me. Yes. I sat down. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was ashamed. That's not enough. I know. He lowered his head. I thought if I could help Amanda get back on her feet, everything would disappear. And what about me? I didn't think about you. The honesty hurt. But at least it was honest. I stood. Do you know what the worst part is? Dad looked up. You didn't think I was incapable. You knew I could handle myself. But instead of respecting me, you used that strength against me. Tears filled his eyes. I'm sorry. I nodded. I believe you. He looked surprised. But believing your apology doesn't mean I can pretend nothing happened. I understand. Before I left, Dad called my name. Claire. I turned. I want to tell you something before the police hear it from someone else. What? Robert came to me 6 months ago. My heart stopped. What did he say? He said your company was worth much more than people realized. I stared at him. What else? He said you had no children. I frowned. Why would that matter? Dad looked away. He said that made your company easier to take over. The room went silent. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Robert hadn't just wanted money. He had studied my life. My company. My family. My future. He had identified me as someone vulnerable. And the people who were supposed to protect me had given him access. The next morning, I received another message from Detective Harris. We recovered the remaining 90,000. I opened the attachment. The money had been transferred through several accounts, then deposited into one final account. The account holder's name was Michael Carter, Dad's former business partner, the man Amanda had mentioned. But there was something else. A transaction description attached to the transfer. Only 3 words. Acquisition Deposit CB. My initials. Claire Bennett. I stared at the screen. Then my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered. Nobody spoke. Then a man's voice finally came through. Claire. I froze. It was Robert. He spoke calmly. You've been asking a lot of questions. I didn't answer. He continued. You should stop. I tightened my grip on the phone. Or what? He laughed softly. You still don't understand. Understand what? The 250,000 was never meant to hurt you. Then what was it for? A long silence. Then Robert said. It was. The price of making you look guilty. The line went dead. And in that moment, I knew this was no longer about my family. It was about destroying everything I had built. And I wasn't going to let him. I didn't tell anyone about Robert's phone call. Not my parents. Not Amanda. Not even my closest employees. I called Laura instead. She listened carefully while I explained exactly what Robert had said. When I finished, she was silent for a moment. Did he threaten you? Not directly. Did he say anything that could be interpreted as a threat? He said the 250,000 was the price of making me look guilty. Laura exhaled slowly. That's useful. Useful? Yes. Why? Because if he knows you're investigating him, he may make a mistake. I looked at my phone. What should I do? Nothing. Nothing. Don't confront him. Don't contact him. Don't warn him. Let him think you're scared. I understood. We let him talk. Exactly. The next morning, I went to work as usual. I greeted employees. Attended meetings. Reviewed financial reports. I acted like nothing had happened. But behind the scenes, Laura's team was working. They reviewed every corporate filing, every loan application, every suspicious transaction, every email connected to the fake company. By lunchtime, Laura called. We found something. What? Robert used the same attorney who prepared your parents' mortgage documents. I frowned. That can't be a coincidence. No. What else? The attorney's office has records showing Robert requested copies of your company's corporate filings. When? 5 months ago. I felt a chill. That was before Amanda's loan. Before the fake company. Before the 250,000. This had been planned for months. Then Laura said something even more disturbing. He also requested information about your succession plan. I froze. My what? Your company's ownership succession documents. Why? That's what we're trying to determine. I immediately thought of Dad's warning. Robert had asked about whether I had children. He had looked into my company's future. He had studied my ownership. He wasn't simply trying to steal money. He was studying how to take control. That afternoon, Detective Harris arrived at my office. He brought a warrant. We're searching Robert's office. Why? We found enough evidence to establish probable cause. Can I come? No. Fair enough. He paused before leaving. Claire. Yes. You should prepare yourself. For what? We don't know how much evidence we'll find. 2 hours later, my phone rang. Detective Harris. We found the files. What files? Everything. My heart began racing. Explain. There are folders containing your personal information. Tax documents. Credit reports. Corporate filings. Copies of your signature. I closed my eyes. And there are also documents outlining a plan to acquire your company. I sat down. How? He intended to create financial pressure around you. Then make investors believe you were unstable. Then offer to purchase your company through an intermediary. I couldn't believe it. He had designed a plan to destroy my reputation. Then buy what remained. But Robert had made one mistake. He had documented everything. Names. Dates. Amounts. Instructions. And even conversations with Amanda. There was one handwritten note Detective Harris found particularly important. It said, "Claire will never fight family." I stared at those words. For years, they had been right. I had avoided confrontation. I had forgiven people. I had walked away. I had stayed quiet. But Robert had misunderstood something. I wasn't fighting my family. I was protecting myself. And there was a difference. That evening, I went to my parents' house. Dad opened the door. He immediately knew something had happened. What is it? I handed him the copy of Robert's plan. He read it. His face changed. He was going to take your company. Yes. Dad sat down. Mom came into the room. What happened? Dad handed her the document. She read it. Then began crying. I didn't know. I believe you. Dad looked at me. I should have stopped him. Yes. I should have told you. Yes. I should have protected you. I nodded. Yes. He looked devastated. I'm sorry. I sat beside him. Then help me finish this. He looked at me. How? Tell the police everything. He nodded. I will. Mom sat down beside us. So will I. The next day, both of my parents gave formal statements. They admitted everything. The documents they had given Amanda. The money they had received. The conversations with Robert. Everything. For the first time in my life. They chose the truth over protecting Amanda. It didn't erase what they'd done. But it mattered. 3 days later, the arrests happened. Amanda was arrested first. Then Robert. The news spread quickly through our hometown. People who had known our family for decades suddenly knew my name. My company was mentioned in several articles. But this time, the story wasn't that I had failed. It wasn't that I was involved in fraud. It was that someone had attempted to steal my identity and manipulate my family. The lender formally cleared me. The fraudulent debt was removed from my credit. The $250,000 claim was transferred into the investigation. And then came the moment I had been waiting for. The bill was officially returned to the people responsible. Not me. A week later, Laura placed the final document on my desk. The debt is no longer attached to you. I looked at the paper. $250,000. A number that had once terrified me. Now it was simply evidence. I leaned back in my chair. For the first time, I understood something. They had expected me to panic, to beg, to borrow money, to sell my house, to protect Amanda. Instead, I had done the one thing they never expected. I had said no, and I had meant it. But the story wasn't over. Because while Amanda and Robert were facing charges, my parents were sitting at home waiting for a decision. They had lost their house. Their savings were nearly gone. Their relationship with Amanda was shattered. And now, they wanted to know if their daughter would ever speak to them again. The next time I saw them, they weren't asking me for money. They weren't asking me to save anyone. They were asking for something much harder. A second chance. For the first time in my life, my parents had nothing to ask me for. No emergency. No favor. No loan. No request to just help Amanda one more time. They simply wanted to see me. I agreed to meet them at a small cafe halfway between their house and mine. When I arrived, Mom and Dad were already sitting in the corner. They looked different. Not because they had aged, because they had finally lost the confidence that someone else would fix their problems. Dad stood when he saw me. "Claire." I nodded. "Hi." Mom smiled weakly. "Thank you for coming." I sat down. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Finally, Dad said, "We've sold the house." I knew that already. "I'm sorry. We're moving into an apartment." "Okay." He looked at me. "We're not asking you for anything." I nodded. "Good." Mom lowered her eyes. "We just wanted you to know." I took a sip of coffee. "Thank you for telling me." There was another silence. Then Dad said, "We deserve whatever distance you need." I looked at him. "Yes." He nodded. "I know." Mom reached into her purse. She pulled out a small envelope. "This is for you." I didn't touch it. "What is it?" "Something I should have given you years ago." I opened it. Inside was a photograph. I stared at it. It was me at 8 years old, standing beside a small science project at the school fair. I remembered that day. The blue poster board. The tiny wind turbine. The empty chair beside me. I had forgotten the photograph existed. Mom whispered. "I found it in an old box." I turned it over. There was writing on the back. Claire's first science fair, 3rd place. My eyes filled with tears. Mom looked at me. I was supposed to be there. I couldn't answer. "I remember promising you." She wiped her cheek. "I didn't come." "No." I told myself I had a reason. "You did." "I was taking Amanda to her tournament." I nodded. "I know." Mom looked down. But there wasn't a good reason. That sentence was everything I'd wanted to hear as a child. And somehow, hearing it now hurt more. Dad reached across the table. "I want to tell you something." I waited. "After you left, I kept expecting you to come back." I frowned. "You never called." "I know." "You never visited." "I know." "You never asked how I was." He looked down. "I thought you were angry." I was. "Then I thought you were too proud." I stared at him. "And then?" He swallowed. "I realized you weren't coming back because you had finally learned how to live without us." I didn't say anything. Dad's eyes filled with tears. That was the moment I understood how badly we'd failed you. I looked at both of them. I need you to understand something. They waited. I don't hate you. Mom looked up. But I don't trust you. Dad nodded. I understand. And trust isn't going to come back because you apologize. We know. It will take years. Dad nodded. Then we'll wait. That surprised me. What? We'll wait. He looked at Mom. We don't get to decide how quickly you heal. For the first time. I believed him. Then Mom asked, "Can I ask you one thing?" "Yes." "Do you think you'll ever forgive us?" I looked out the window. Cars moved along the street. People laughed. A couple walked past holding hands. Life continued. I thought about the little girl in the photograph. The girl who had waited for her parents. The teenager who had stopped expecting them. The woman who had built a company without their support. And finally, I thought about who I was now. I don't know. Mom nodded. That's fair. But I looked at her. I'm willing to try. She began crying. Dad reached for her hand. Neither of them asked me to hug them. Neither asked me to promise everything would be okay. They simply sat there. And somehow, that was enough. A month later, the legal case moved forward. Amanda pleaded guilty to identity theft and fraud-related charges. Robert faced multiple charges connected to the scheme. My parents were not charged with the primary fraud offenses because their cooperation and evidence helped investigators establish the larger conspiracy, though they still faced financial and legal consequences for the money they had accepted. Amanda's business was closed. The fake company was dissolved. The fraudulent accounts were frozen. And the $250,000 debt was no longer mine. The bill had finally gone where it belonged. One evening, I returned home from work and found an envelope in my mailbox. There was no return address. I opened it inside. It was from Amanda. The letter was 6 pages long. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask me to defend her. She didn't ask me to forgive her. Instead, she wrote about the things she'd remembered from childhood. The times she'd watched me study. The awards I'd won. The birthdays she'd forgotten. The moments she'd asked Mom and Dad for things while I stood quietly nearby. Then she wrote, "I spent my whole life believing you were the lucky one because you could take care of yourself. I finally understand that being strong doesn't mean someone should keep hurting you." I read the letter twice. Then I folded it carefully. I wasn't ready to forgive her. But I wasn't carrying anger anymore. There was a difference. 6 months later, I received another letter. This one was from Dad. It contained only one sentence on the first page. "You don't owe us anything." I continued reading. He told me he had started volunteering at a local financial literacy program. Mom had begun helping at a community center. They were rebuilding their lives slowly. Without asking me for money. Without asking me to fix things. Without making Amanda's problems my responsibility. And then Dad wrote, "For the first time, we're learning how to love you without needing anything from you." I put the letter down. For years, I had believed forgiveness meant letting people back into your life exactly where they had left. I finally understood that wasn't true. Sometimes forgiveness means releasing the anger, while keeping the boundary. Sometimes love means saying, "I wish you well, but I cannot carry you anymore." And sometimes the greatest revenge isn't watching people suffer. It's becoming so whole that their approval no longer determines your worth. I thought the 250,000 fraud had taken something from me. Instead, it gave me the final lesson my family had never been able to teach me. My life was mine. And this time, I wasn't giving it back. 6 months after the fraud was exposed, my life looked completely different. Not dramatically, not magically, just quieter. The kind of quiet I had once thought was impossible. My company was growing again. The fraudulent accounts had been closed. My credit had been restored. The legal mess was finally behind me. And, most importantly, I no longer woke up wondering which family emergency was waiting for me. I had learned to protect my peace. But there was one thing I hadn't expected. I had started enjoying my life. Not surviving it. Not managing it. Actually enjoying it. One Saturday morning, I sat on my back porch with a cup of coffee. The same porch where I'd spent countless nights worrying about bills, family arguments, and problems that weren't mine. The sunlight came through the trees. My phone was silent. I smiled. Then I heard a knock at the front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I found Dad standing there. He held a small cardboard box. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Sure." He walked inside. "I brought something." He placed the box on the table. "What is it?" "Your old things." I opened it. Inside were photographs, school certificates, a few childhood notebooks, my first paycheck, a little wooden trophy from an elementary school competition. I picked it up. I thought these were gone. Dad smiled sadly. "Your mother kept them." I looked through the box. Then I found a folded piece of paper. It was an old essay I'd written when I was 11. The title was, "What I Want to Be When I Grow Up." I opened it. My handwriting was uneven. The first line said, "I want to build something that belongs to me." I laughed softly. Dad watched me. "You did." I looked at him. "Yes." He nodded. "And we almost destroyed it." I didn't respond. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He simply sat there. After a while, Dad said, "I want you to know something." "What?" "We've changed." I smiled slightly. "I hope so. We're not expecting you to trust us." "Good." "We're not expecting you to forget." "Good." "We just want to prove that we can be different." I looked at him. "Then do it." He nodded. "That's what we're trying to do." Before he left, he hugged me. I allowed it. But this time, the hug didn't feel like an obligation. It felt like a choice. Mine. A few weeks later, I received another unexpected message. It was from Amanda. She had completed the first stage of her legal sentence. Her message was short. "I know I don't deserve anything from you. I just wanted to say thank you for not lying to protect me." I read it several times. Then I replied with 4 words. "Take responsibility. Stay honest." Nothing more. I didn't need to become her savior. She needed to become responsible for herself. That was the boundary I had spent my entire life trying to learn. 1 year after the fraudulent loan was filed, I received an official letter. The case had been concluded. The court had recognized that I was a victim of identity theft. The fraudulent debt had been permanently removed from my records. My name was cleared. I held the letter in my hands for several minutes. Then I laughed. Not because the situation was funny. Because I remembered the first letter. The one that had made my hands shake. The one that had made me believe my entire life could collapse overnight. Now I was holding the final document. And the number that once terrified me no longer had any power. 250,000. It was never my debt. It was never my responsibility. And it never defined me. That evening, I drove to my parents' new apartment. It was small. Nothing like the large house they'd once owned. Mom had planted flowers outside the window. Dad had a little chair beside the door. They were rebuilding. Slowly. Honestly. Without Amanda's constant emergencies. Without pretending everything was perfect. Mom opened the door. "You're early." "I know." She smiled. "Come in." We ate dinner together. Nothing fancy. Soup. Bread. A simple salad. At one point, Dad laughed at something Mom said. I watched them. For the first time, I wasn't calculating what they needed from me. I wasn't waiting for the next request. I wasn't wondering whether someone would ask me to pay a bill. I was simply sitting with my parents. And somehow, that was enough. After dinner, Dad walked me to my car. He stopped before I opened the door. "Claire." "Yes. I'm proud of you." Those words hit me harder than I expected. For years, I'd wanted to hear them. When I graduated. When I started my company. When I bought my house. When I succeeded. I had waited for them. Now, I didn't need them anymore. But hearing them still mattered. "Thank you." Dad nodded. Then he said, "You should have heard it years ago." I smiled. "Yes." He looked down. "I'm sorry it took us so long." I reached over and hugged him. This time, I didn't feel like the abandoned daughter. I didn't feel like the responsible one. I didn't feel like the family problem solver. I was simply Claire. A woman who had survived something that was supposed to destroy her. And built an even better life afterward. Driving home that night, I thought about the title of my old childhood essay. I want to build something that belongs to me. I had spent years thinking that meant a house. A company. Financial security. A successful career. But now I understood. I had built something much more important. A life with boundaries. A life where my kindness wasn't an open invitation. A life where no didn't require an explanation. A life where family didn't automatically mean sacrificing myself. And most importantly, a life where I finally knew my own worth. They had tried to put a 250,000 debt in my name. They had forged my signature. Used my identity. Risked my future. And expected me to protect them because we were family. Instead, I sent the bill back. Not with revenge. Not with cruelty. With the truth. You made this. You deal with it. And that was the moment I finally understood something I wish I'd known much earlier. Sometimes saying no isn't selfish. Sometimes it's the first time you choose yourself. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can do for the people you love is stop rescuing them from the consequences of their own choices. Because I wasn't the same woman they had used. I wasn't the daughter who apologized for having boundaries. I wasn't the sister who cleaned up everyone's mistakes. I wasn't the person who believed keeping the family together was worth losing herself. I had become someone else. Someone stronger. Someone wiser. Someone who finally understood that my life belonged to me. And nobody, not my sister, not my parents, not my uncle, not anyone, would ever take that from me again. For the first few months after everything ended, I kept expecting another phone call, another problem, another bill. Another person telling me that I was the only one who could help. But the phone stayed silent. And slowly, I realized something. The silence wasn't loneliness. It was freedom. I started taking weekends off. I traveled more. I spent evenings cooking instead of answering family emergencies. I even started planning things months ahead without wondering whether Amanda would suddenly need money. My life became mine again. Then, one afternoon, I received a message from an unknown number. "Hi Claire. This is Michael Carter." I stared at the screen. Dad's former business partner. The man connected to the missing $42,500. I almost deleted the message. Instead, I showed it to Laura. She immediately called me. "Don't respond." "Okay. Forward everything to Detective Harris." I did. Within an hour, the police confirmed that Michael wanted to cooperate with the investigation. He had been hiding information because he was afraid of Robert. And according to his statement, Robert had been planning the scheme for almost a year. That meant the fraud hadn't started with Amanda's failing business. Amanda had simply become the easiest person for Robert to manipulate. The real plan had always been bigger. My identity. My company. My financial reputation. My future. Michael eventually testified. His testimony connected Robert to the fake company. It also explained the $42,500. Robert had paid Michael to create financial records that would make the fraudulent transactions appear legitimate. But Michael had kept copies. Copies that ultimately helped prove the entire scheme. When Laura told me the case was finally complete, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Closure. Not happiness. Not revenge. Closure. I didn't need Robert to apologize. I didn't need Amanda to suffer. I didn't even need my parents to understand everything I'd been through. I just needed the truth to exist somewhere outside my own head. And now it did. Months later, I was invited to speak at a small business event. The topic was financial security for entrepreneurs. I almost laughed when I saw the title. Before the event, I stood backstage looking at hundreds of people. For a second, I remembered the woman I'd been when the first letter arrived. Terrified. Confused. Ashamed. She had thought someone else's fraud might destroy everything she'd built. She had no idea that the experience would eventually teach her how to protect it. I walked onto the stage. The audience became quiet. I looked at them and said, "Sometimes the biggest financial danger isn't a stranger. It's someone who knows exactly how much you trust them." The room stayed silent. I continued. Trust is valuable. But boundaries are valuable too. And if someone repeatedly asks you to sacrifice your security for their mistakes, saying no isn't cruelty. It's responsibility. I looked across the room. Because you can't save someone by destroying yourself. The audience applauded. But I wasn't thinking about the applause. I was thinking about my younger self. The girl who always believed being a good daughter meant saying yes. I wished I could go back and tell her one thing. You don't have to earn love by being useful. That evening, I returned home. I placed the event badge on my desk. Then I opened an old drawer. Inside was the first letter from the lender. The original one. The letter that had terrified me. I read it one final time. Then I folded it. Not because I wanted to remember the pain. Because I wanted to remember how far I'd come. I put it beside the childhood photograph Mom had given me. The little girl at the science fair. And the woman she became. Two versions of me. One waiting for approval. One who no longer needed it. I closed the drawer. Then I smiled. The bill had never been mine, but the lesson was. And I would carry that lesson for the rest of my life. Never confuse love with obligation. Never confuse forgiveness with permission. And never let anyone convince you that protecting yourself means you don't love them. Sometimes protecting yourself is the first truly honest thing you can do. 2 years passed. Not quickly, not perfectly, but peacefully. My parents slowly rebuilt their lives. Mom found part-time work at a community center. Dad started helping small business owners with budgeting and financial planning. They never asked me for money again. Not once. And that mattered more than any apology. Amanda served her sentence and eventually began working with a financial rehabilitation program. We exchanged occasional letters. Our relationship never returned to what it had been. But it became something more honest. There were no expectations. No guilt. No demands. Just two sisters learning how to exist without pretending the past hadn't happened. One Sunday afternoon, I received a message from Amanda. "I have something for you." I wasn't sure what she meant. An hour later, she arrived at my house. She stood outside the door holding a small wooden box. "Can I come in?" I nodded. She sat at the kitchen table. "I found this while cleaning my storage unit." She opened the box. Inside were old family photographs. Birthdays. Christmas mornings. School events. Summer vacations. Then she pulled out one particular photograph. It was a picture of the four of us. Mom, Dad, Amanda, and me. We were standing in front of our old house. I was maybe 16. Amanda was 13. Everyone was smiling. I stared at the photograph for a long time. "I remember this day." Amanda nodded. "I do too." "What happened?" She smiled sadly. "We were actually happy that day." I looked at her. "Do you think we were?" For a few minutes. I laughed softly. "So much for the perfect family." She smiled. "Yeah." Then her expression became serious. "I need to tell you something." "What?" "I used to hate that you were independent." I wasn't surprised. "I know." "No." She shook her head. "You don't." "I thought you hated that I got more attention." "I did. But that wasn't the real reason." She looked down. "I hated that you didn't need anyone." I said nothing. She continued. "I thought that made you better than me. And instead of becoming stronger, I tried to make you smaller." The honesty hurt. But it was different from the excuses I'd heard before. Amanda wasn't asking me to make her feel better. She was admitting what she had done. "I was jealous of your life," she said. "And I was jealous of how easily everyone forgave you." She looked at me. "I thought you were lucky." I smiled sadly. "I thought you were." We both laughed. For the first time. The laughter didn't feel forced. Before she left, Amanda stood at the door. "Claire." "Yes." "Do you think we'll ever be sisters again?" I thought about it. Maybe. Her eyes filled with hope. "But not the way we were." She nodded. "I understand. Maybe we can become something better." "What?" "Two adults who actually respect each other." Amanda smiled. "I'd like that." She walked away. I watched her car disappear down the street. And for the first time, I didn't feel responsible for where she was going. I simply hoped she would choose the right direction. That was enough. That night, I called Mom. She answered immediately. "Claire." "Hi, Mom." Her voice brightened. Everything okay? Yes. I smiled. I just wanted to say hello. There was silence. Then Mom said, I love you. I closed my eyes. I love you too. It was strange. The words had once felt complicated. Now they felt simple. Love didn't mean pretending. It didn't mean rescuing. It didn't mean allowing someone to hurt you repeatedly. Love could exist alongside boundaries. Maybe that was what I'd been trying to understand all along. Later that night, I stood on my balcony. The city lights stretched into the distance. My company was thriving. My home was peaceful. My relationships were finally honest. And my life belonged completely to me. I thought about the $250,000 debt. The forged signature. The fake company. The missing money. The family betrayal. It had all seemed like the end of my life. Instead, it became the beginning of a different one. A life where I stopped asking, what do they need from me? And started asking, what do I need from myself? That question changed everything. Because once you understand your own worth, people can still disappoint you. They can still hurt you. They can still betray you. But they can no longer convince you that their choices are your responsibility. And that was the greatest thing I walked away with. Not the money. Not the company. Not even the legal victory. It was the ability to look at someone I loved and say, I love you. But I will not destroy myself for you. And finally, be at peace with both sentences being true. A few weeks after Amanda visited me, I found myself standing in front of the old family house. It was empty now. The windows were covered. The garden had grown wild. The place looked smaller than I remembered. I stood at the gate for a moment, wondering why I'd come. Maybe I was looking for the version of myself who had lived there. The daughter who had spent years trying to earn approval. The sister who believed she had to compete for love. The woman who had learned to say yes before anyone even finished asking. I realized something. I wasn't there because I missed the house. I was there because I no longer needed it. I walked through the front door. The living room was empty. The walls were bare. But memories remained everywhere. The couch where Mom used to sit. The kitchen where Dad paid bills. The staircase where Amanda and I used to argue. My old bedroom. I walked inside. There was nothing left except a small mark on the wall. I remembered measuring my height there as a child. Every year. June after June. I smiled. Then I touched the wall. I made it, I whispered. Not financially. Not professionally. I meant something else. I had made it out of the version of myself that needed everyone else's approval. My phone rang. It was Dad. Where are you? The old house. There was silence. I thought they sold it. They did. Why are you there? I don't know. Dad laughed softly. I understand. I sat on the staircase. Do you ever miss it? The house. Everything. He was quiet. Sometimes. Me too. Then he said, but I think we're supposed to miss some things without going back to them. I smiled. That's probably true. Before leaving, I walked into the kitchen. There was one thing still hanging on the refrigerator. A faded photograph. The four of us. I took it down. For a moment, I considered leaving it. Then I realized I wanted it. Not because the past was perfect. Because it was mine too. I put the photograph in my bag. Then I walked out. I locked the door behind me. And I didn't look back. That evening,
Cuento
I returned
sobre las
home and placed the
fronteras
photograph
de
on my
Israel.
desk.
¿O
Next to
prefieren
it,
más tarde?
I placed the
¿Los dejo
childhood
dormidos?
science fair picture. The two photographs looked completely different. In one, I was a child waiting for her family. In the other, I was an adult who had learned to stand on her own. I looked at them both. Then I understood the final lesson. Growing up isn't always about becoming stronger. Sometimes it's about realizing you were already strong. You just spent years giving other people credit for your strength. A month later, my company opened a new office. I stood outside the building while the sign was being installed. My name wasn't on it. And that made me smile. Because I had finally learned something important. I didn't need my name on every wall to prove what I'd built. I knew. My employees knew. My clients knew. That was enough. After the opening ceremony, Dad called. Congratulations. Thank you. I'm proud of you. I smiled. Thank you, Dad. There was a pause. Then he said, and Claire, yes. We're not asking for anything. I laughed. I know. We just wanted to celebrate you. For the first time, that sentence didn't make me suspicious. It made me happy. Then come celebrate. That evening, my parents arrived. Mom brought flowers. Dad brought a cake. Amanda sent a card. We sat together in the new office. There were no arguments. No financial problems. No requests. No guilt. Just dinner. Just conversation. Just family. Not the family we had been. The family we were slowly becoming. A healthier one. A quieter one. A family where love didn't require sacrifice. Later that night, after everyone left, I stood alone in my office. The city lights reflected against the windows. I thought about the day the 250,000 bill arrived. I remembered how terrified I'd been. I remembered thinking my life was collapsing. But now I understood. The fraud didn't destroy my life. It destroyed an illusion. The illusion that being a good daughter meant fixing everyone's problems. The illusion that being a good sister meant protecting someone from every consequence. The illusion that family meant unlimited access to my life. Once those illusions disappeared, I could finally build something real. I opened my laptop. There was an unfinished document on the screen. A personal note I'd started months earlier. At the top, I'd written, "Things I will never forget." I added 3 final sentences. I will never apologize for protecting myself. I will never confuse guilt with responsibility. And I will never again allow someone else's crisis to become my identity. I saved the document. Then I closed the laptop. The room became quiet. And for the first time, quiet didn't feel empty. It felt like peace. Years earlier, my sister had looked at my life and seen someone she could use. My parents had looked at me and seen someone who would always say yes. Robert had looked at my company and seen something he could steal. They were all wrong. Because I wasn't the woman they remembered. I wasn't the daughter waiting for approval. I wasn't the sister waiting to be chosen. I wasn't the employee afraid of failure. I wasn't the person who believed saying no made her selfish. I was simply Claire. And my life belonged to me. The 250,000 debt had arrived with my name on it. But I sent it back. Not because I was cruel. Not because I wanted revenge. Because it wasn't mine. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to carry what someone else deliberately placed on your shoulders. I turned off the office light, locked the door, and walked home. This time, I wasn't running away from my family. I wasn't running toward their approval. I was simply walking forward into a life I had finally chosen for myself. 2 years after the fraud, I thought the hardest part of my life was finally behind me. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday afternoon when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I almost ignored it. Then I answered. "Hello." A man's voice replied. "Is this Claire Bennett?" "Yes. My name is Daniel. I'm calling from the State Financial Crimes Office." My stomach tightened. "Is something wrong?" "We've reopened part of the investigation involving Robert Bennett." I sat down. "Why?" "We found another set of financial records." "What records?" "Transactions connected to the original scheme." I closed my eyes. I thought the case was finished. So did we. He paused. "Until last week." I waited. "There's evidence that Robert wasn't acting alone." I immediately thought of Amanda. "Who else?" "Someone outside your family." "Who?" "We can't discuss the details over the phone." "Then why are you calling me?" "Because there's one thing we need from you." "What?" "A document." "What document?" "Your grandfather's original property records." I froze. "My grandfather?" "Yes." "Why?" "We believe the property may have been part of the original plan." I couldn't speak. The small piece of land my grandfather had left me years ago suddenly came back to mind. The property I'd always considered separate from my business. Separate from my finances. Separate from everything. Apparently, it wasn't. I searched through my files that night. After almost an hour, I found the old property documents. The deed. The survey. The original inheritance papers. And one handwritten note from my grandfather. I had never paid much attention to it. Now I read it carefully. It said, "Claire, this land is yours. Never let anyone convince you that you owe it to them." I stared at the sentence. My grandfather had written those words years before any of this happened. I felt a strange chill. He had always known my family. He had always known how they behaved. Maybe he understood something about me that I hadn't understood yet. The next morning, I gave the documents to the investigator. He studied them. Then looked up. "This is important." "Why?" "The property was used as a reference in one of Robert's financial plans." I felt sick. What did he want to do with it? Use it as leverage. For what? To pressure you into selling part of your business. I shook my head. He planned all of this. Yes. I looked at the documents. For years, I had thought my grandfather's final gift was simply a piece of land. Now I realized it had been something else. A reminder. A warning. A foundation. Something that belonged to me before anyone else could claim it.